Cameras on. Good morning. Badur, I see you decided to join the morning class as well. Very good. There you go. I have a computer. There you go. Makes a huge difference, I'm telling you. Hey, Robin, I see you there too. Right? All right. Got Jacqueline, Nina already typing her 1,000 questions, I'm sure. Benjamin and Elda. There you go. Mac let us down. Listen, I'm not a Macs are great. They're like user friendly, but like I said, they integrate with and you compat even for the exam, for the school exam, I have to give you a separate link if you want to do it on a Mac. It's forget it. Like it's against the whole world. And I totally understand we want to be unique. You want to have something that stands out and be able to charge 3 times the price. I understand, right? But when it comes to being compatible with the whole world, you know, terrible. Anyway. All right, um, for Robin, you already know because you're already towards the end. But Ahmed, here's the thing: we are in the last week of the morning, so you know, in the last week of the morning. This is chapter 27 and 28 today. Then we have 29, 30, and then math, and that is it. So you'll be ahead of the game when it comes to your evening class. That's pretty much what's happening. So you're gonna finish before they do if you continue doing the morning classes. Okay. So just giving you a heads up since you're here as well in the morning. All right. So what's happening this week as well is mainly reviews, right? So New Jersey has a few things that are specific to Jersey, but majority of the stuff that we're going to address, they were already addressed in the national portion of the book. Okay. So talking about New Jersey, yeah, I know, Robin. Nina, I'm still waiting for your 1,000 questions. I just want to know if I should move forward or not. Oh, there you go. All right. Messages came through. So for those of you that are from the evening class, just to let you know, we usually spend the first 3 hours of the class answering Nina's questions. And then we have roughly 45 minutes to an hour where we get to do the actual class. So here we go. I'm telling you, look at this. I mean, can't make this up. But that's one of the things that I like, that I keep on asking you guys. Ask questions, because that means two things. One, you're studying, or two, you're curious, or three, you really want to learn. Because there's one thing that's studying, and then another thing is I really want to learn. Studying is I go through it, and you know what? Let's see where we go. Asking questions is I really want to learn, and I want to move forward, and I want to pass. So, and the reason why I'm saying this is I'm not saying that the rest of you don't want to pass, but I keep on saying that it's key that you ask questions, because going to the exam with doubts will be a problem, right? So it's key that you have all these questions. Now, evening class, I just want to let you guys know that there's some type of conspiracy. I think everybody in the morning class sends messages to Nina and say, Nina, you have the guts of asking a million questions, so go ahead. All right, so that's what happens. All right, just so you guys know. So here we go. First question. If a buyer places a verbal or offer, do you mention it to the seller, reject it, or tell them to put it in writing? I'm going to let you think about that one. I want everybody to give me your opinion. What do you think? Do you think a verbal offer stands? Right? Should we even mention to the seller and say, hey, we have a client that's going to offer $1 million for your $100,000 house. What do you think? What do you think the answer would be on this one? Right? I'm actually going to leave it to you guys. Robin says, put it in writing. Robin, I figured that was your attitude. Like, put it in writing. That's it. Not dealing with you unless it's in writing. Anybody else? What do you guys think? Okay. Email in writing. Okay. Anybody else? Put it in writing. All right, so we got 3 put it in writings. Great. And that's key. So it's not that verbal offers are not valid. It's just that we really cannot trust it. That's what it is. It could be a valid verbal offer, but put it in writing. I'll submit to all written offers will be submitted to my clients. Verbal offers, I don't have to, and I won't. Give me something solid. In fact, with that written offer, make sure you attach a pre-approval or money in the bank. Show me that you got the money. Show me that you're serious. And while you're at it, it's not required, but give me that $1,000 or $2,000, $3,000 deposit. You see what I'm saying? So again, not required. None of these are required. But without it, do we have a solid foundation to present to our client? No. All right? So always, always ask them to put in writing. Next. How would a seller or buyer know if someone was working with an expired license? So that becomes a little tricky unless they know to go to the New Jersey Department of Banking and Insurance, or NJDOBI for short. Unless they know to go there, yeah. Or if they ask, hey, let me see your license, right? So not many people are going to be like me. Boom, license, done. All right, not many people. I do have my pocket license here. So not many people will do that, ask, because they don't know to ask. Do you understand? So next one is, if you want to hire a landlord, who should you contact for references? Hire a landlord. Property manager? No? Landlord? Explain. Probably previous employers, but would tenants be a good idea as well? I got lost on that one. I'm still lost because we don't hire landlords. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Landlord hires us as property managers. So I'm just trying to figure out what the question is. You just realized it? Okay. So you're talking about property manager, I assume. So, yep. Okay. So, where were we? Right here. If you want to hire a property manager, oh, Ruth is on as well. I'm sorry, Ruth, I didn't see you there, but put it in writing, definitely. So where were we? Okay, so if you want to hire a property manager, who should you contact for references? Probably previous employers, but would tenants be a good idea as well? Absolutely. So any references that you can get, previous employers, tenants and their experience, yep, definitely. Those are great things to ask. What's the benefit of having a gross lease for a landlord? It's not a benefit or a disadvantage. It's just that for residential, traditionally, gross leases is what we use. For commercial, if you're asking this question for commercial, then what's the advantage of having a gross lease? Are you able to charge more? So for instance, if I know the utilities, or if I'm including all the utilities, right, into the, or some of the utilities into the deal, and I know based on energy efficient, all that stuff that I installed, as an example, is going to cost me X amount of dollars, right? But if you do it, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars. If I provide you cable, as an example, right, it's going to cost me throughout the whole building, it's going to cost me like $50 per unit, whereas if you do it, it's going to cost you $100 and something in your unit. So I'm going to be able to charge you more to cover my expenses. Now, gross leases usually don't have utilities included. So I just give you an example for you to understand some of the advantages of a gross lease. The disadvantage of a gross lease is that, hey, you pay me in full, and I'm responsible as a landlord. I'm responsible for taxes, insurance, maintenance, and all that stuff. So there's a disadvantage there, right? But do I really want to put that on you? So let's think about this. If I put that burden on you in an area where it's not like the rents, I pay low taxes, right? If I charge you that, if I put that charge on you, how much more am I going to gain? But if I pay high taxes, can I divide by everybody? And then the other question is, by dividing by everybody, there's something called like common areas, maintenance, tax, insurance. When I put all those together, is my lease going to be good enough for people to want to rent here, right? Like the fee that I'm going to charge plus whatever they have to pay, is it going to be good enough? Should I compromise a little bit and be like, you know what, fine, I'll just do a flat fee, no worries, just move in and that's it, right? So it's not about a benefit or disadvantage. There's pros and cons to every type of lease. Like a percentage lease, for instance. In a percentage lease, I'm pretty much investing in your business. Not directly, but I'm investing in your business, because if you make money, I get paid more. You understand? So if you make no money, then I'm at a loss. There's pros and cons to all types of leases, all types of financing, all types of investments. Everything has its pros and its cons. So what is the benefit? In certain areas where everybody's charging ridiculous rates plus property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, a gross lease might be the way to say, hey, don't worry about it, because it will never increase or spike based on the taxes. Just a flat fee, that's it, or based on maintenance or whatever. I'll handle all that. So it's a benefit to gain a client, right? And I'll tell you this because sometimes I'm here wondering, like we have common areas here in this building. And I'm here wondering, well, if something happens, do I have to pay? If City of Newark decides to spike the taxes, how much is going to come to me? As a tenant, I'm thinking it's dangerous. Should I really get involved in this, or should I walk away? Should I find another lease? That's what our thought was before deciding for this location. Does that make sense? So benefit of gross lease is mainly to secure a tenant. That's how I see it. There's a lot of disadvantages, but the benefit is secure a tenant. All right, do agents keep records, email offers, etc., or should that be left within the office for the broker to do? So permanent records are the broker's records. Should you keep a copy because it's your file? Absolutely. Always protect yourselves. You're independent contractors. Protect yourselves. Keep copies of everything you have. Digitalize it, right? Don't have a paper storage, but digitalize everything. And your broker has to have copies of all your records when it comes to a particular property or deal. So they have to keep it just in case there's potential lawsuits. So they need to know what happened. Now, you wrote emails. Does the broker have to keep a copy of our emails? No, but you do. You are required, and it's on you. If you lose those emails, right? If you delete those emails, it's on you to later on protect yourself. So I don't have to go there and say, Nina, as a broker, I don't have to say, Nina, hand over your emails. No. You don't have to CC me or copy me in every single email. But I think it's wise you do. So we keep a copy in our file. So everything is being tracked by everybody. And I can also jump in once in a while and say, hey, Nina, I saw your email. There's something there that you said you should correct right now, right before there's trouble. Just saying, sometimes we type things and we don't think about it right in the moment and repercussions. And maybe your broker with more experience will be able to tell you that's something you shouldn't have said, right? At least if not for now, then for a later deal, it's something you shouldn't have said, something you shouldn't have done, right? Or maybe this way would have been better. You see what I'm saying? So do you need to send us your emails? No. should you copy the transaction coordinator or the team leader or your broker, whoever is responsible for you at the time, should you CC them on every transaction? My answer is yes. Okay. Is a uniform tenant booklet a standard to be given to a tenant? Has to. So in the state of New Jersey, we have the Truth in Renting booklet, right? And the Truth in Renting booklet has to be given to tenants and has to be posted on the property. Now, the thing is, most landlords do not know this, most tenants do not know this. But yes, it must be provided to every tenant. Hey, Yvette, good morning. So it has to be provided to every tenant, yes. All right, for tenant improvements, the space left incomplete for the tenant for business, commercial. Hold on. This for tenant improvements, the space left incomplete for tenant for business, commercial, and industrial. I'm a little lost. For tenant improvements, the space left. Can you? Yeah, I see you disappeared already. So you're gonna rephrase that. I'll wait for that. As far as Felix's question, as I'm waiting for Nina to address that. Felix, yes, there's a pocket license. There's no actual license. It's a pocket license. And there you go. I told you I have it. Hold on. Let me get to the... There. Oh. Can you see it? Pocket license that says how long you've been doing this and all that. I know you cannot see it that well, but once you have yours, you can download it. You're going to receive an email that says, hey, download it here. And you have to keep the pocket license with you. Ruth, can you make copies of it? You're talking about the Truth in Renting or the pocket license? I'm sorry. Just want to make sure what are you asking about the copies. For commercial. The real estate commission. Once you activate your license, you're able to download it online. My broker was very nice and gave it to me. So my business partner decided to do that for every agent. He prints the pocket license and then laminates and everything. Right. It also came with the nice vacation pack. No, just kidding. That didn't come in. I'm still waiting for the vacation pack. Ruth, yes. In fact, the Truth in Renting, so addressing Ruth real quick, the Truth in Renting, you have to, right now they don't even have the copies available for purchase. You download it, print it, and give to all your tenants. What some people do, mainly in property management, like larger buildings, what they do is they include that booklet with the lease agreement. So when they provide you with lease agreement, everything is there. All right, going back to Nina real quick. Is it for business, commercial, and industrial properties? I'm still a little lost in your question here. Still a little lost. Because you're saying for tenant improvements and then the space left incomplete. I'm like not understanding this part of it. I already understood that your question is if this is for commercial industrial property. I'm just not understanding what you're trying to say here. I'm sorry. Usually I'm good early in the morning to pick up things. Today I'm a little slow. I'm sorry. Everybody's entitled to have their days, okay? So don't judge me. The evening class was very tough, and this morning, still decompressing from last night. I spent like almost 3.5 hours trying to get Mr. Badur here to turn his camera on because the Mac wasn't working. Right, we literally started The class starts at 5:30. We literally started around 7:30 just because of him. All right, so Nina, in the property management replay, you mentioned there was a part of the area that's leased, that's left incomplete for tenant to do whatever. I mentioned there must have been a specific example. The part area was leased, it was left incomplete for the tenant to do whatever. So usually, if we're talking about commercial properties, usually they're undeveloped, and then the tenants can build to suit or ask the landlord to build to suit. So maybe that's what I was talking about when it comes to commercial, like retail. Okay, so if it's residential property management, usually it's built already and the tenants just move in. If it's commercial, usually commercial, if that's what you're asking, commercial industrial, usually it's either preset, like in this building where we are right now. This was all empty, right? There was no walls. Obviously, there was the exterior walls, but there was no walls inside on the third floor. And we're the ones that designed what we wanted, and we gave to the landlord, and we made an agreement with the landlord of sharing costs. But the landlord is the one, so just keep our hands clean. Like, it was not our responsibility for the construction; they did it, right? So we washed our hands in that and said, "You guys do the build out, right? We share the cost, but this is our plans. This is what we want." Does that make sense? Some landlords, commercial industrial landlords, what they'll do is like, no, you have your own contractors do the work. As long as they have permits, we don't care, right? So that's it. We preferred that they do the work. So if anything goes wrong, we can call them up all the time and say, hey, what's up? Leaking, roof issues, AC, right? So it wasn't us. The doors are falling, the walls are falling, the ceiling is falling. Like, we can, the point is, we can claim something, right? Versus saying, oh, it was your guys that did it, you know? But usually commercial, yes, it's commercial industrial properties. You have the option of building out, okay, but not all of them. Some of them do have that option. This is why you rent. You rent so you can tell people to do whatever they need to do. Got it. Okay. All right. So, next. Any other questions? We're good to start, right? Yes, no, maybe? All right, cool. So make sure, I know I keep on saying this, but I just want to make sure you guys get it. Make sure the cameras are facing you. Some of you have the camera somewhere here and up. Make sure they're facing you so it counts towards your hours. One way to see if it's facing you or not is look at the screen, and it tells you where you are leveled in that camera. All right? So these two chapters, they're actually short chapters, the next two chapters. And again, mainly reviews of everything that we've been going through in the national portion of it. And we already talked about agency, and we talked about business practices, right? I'm going to ask one more time, because that's what I like to do. I like to go back and forth. I like to go back and forth and always connect with the first week, second week, and so on. So with that being said, my question is, what is agency? By now, everybody should know what agency means. Let me know in the chat. Agency. Agency. Come on. Employer-employee relationship. Salesperson-broker relationship. Good faith. There has to be good faith. Representing someone or okay. Felix, yes. No. Yes. Okay. Ruth wrote brokerage. Okay. So here's the thing. Agency. Well, hold on. Fallon, hold on. Those are the duties that come with agency. That's what you're describing there. But agency, it's not a brokerage. Agency is not brokerage. Okay? Agency, the word agency, that's what I was trying to get at. Agency is employer, employee relationship. Okay? Agency means employer-employee relationship. Now, addressing Ruth and who else do we have here? Broker. Okay. So let me address Ruth real quick. Brokerage, you're thinking about real estate agency, brokerage. Okay. But the word agency, what does it mean? As a real estate agent or as a brokerage, what we're doing is providing a service for whoever hires us, right? So brokerage in itself is not agency. The contracting for service is the agency. So agency means employer-employee. Somebody's hiring for us for our services, our consulting services in this case, our brokerage services, right? And like Fallon was saying here, hold on, let me show you. Like Fallon was saying, there are certain duties that we must have. So she started off with good faith, trust, right? And there's some more. But I told her to stop because my question was, what is agency? An agency is employer-employee relationship. Can we have a real estate agency? Yes. But agency relates to the relationship that the person that hired you, right, and you as a brokerage have. Okay? So agency relationships. In fact, within agency, we have then the duties that that Fallon was talking about. So we have certain duties that we must provide to our client versus our customer, right? What is the difference between client and customer? So we're going to do this real quick. What is the difference between client and customer? Who can tell me in the chat real quick? Client and customer. What is the difference between client and customer? Customer is potential. Okay, you can look at it that way. Client already doing business. We can look at it that way as well. I'm going to show you something else though. All right, so we have Fallon said third party. Felix says a client is who you represent, the customer is a third party. Nina says client is the principal, customer is a third party. Client is the employer or the principal. Client hired you and customer is a third party. So, Mr. Brodeur, obviously you're fresh in the class. You haven't done agency yet, which is chapter 11. But everybody could be a potential. Okay? And I understand what you're saying as far as client, you're already doing business. Right? As far as client, you're already doing business, right? But can you do business with a customer? So you're telling me when you wrote potential, right? Because that's a prospect, is a potential, right? But you're telling me that customer, when you sit down at a restaurant, you are a customer, you're not a client. You're a customer. So you sit down, you're not doing business. Some type of business is happening there. You're eating, right? Somebody's serving, and then you have to pay for the service, right? So, and yes, Robin, there is a huge difference. Again, the client hired you, where the customer is a third party who you're simply treating fairly and honestly. All right? So I'll give you the example again. Who's the client? Well, if the seller hires you, I'm not saying the seller's the client, but if they hire you, now the seller's the client. And the buyer, if you don't represent the buyer's the customer. Okay? Let's look at it the other way around. If you're hired by the buyer to help him buy a house, then the buyer is the client. The buyer is the principal. And then the seller or sellers, that you're going to see several homes, the sellers are customers, right? Do you owe specific duties? Do you need to uphold the customer best interest? No, you need to uphold your client's best interest. So going back to the whole scenario of the restaurant that I was giving Mr. Badur, going back to that, imagine that you're at a restaurant and you are the waiter. I'm the one sitting down and ordering the food. Who do you work for? You're at a restaurant, you're the waiter. Who do you work for? You work for the restaurant. Correct. That means the restaurant owner hired you. They are your clients. Quiznos. All right. let me ask you something. Did you ever hear the word "the client is always right"? The sentence "client's always right." Did you ever hear that? No, you haven't. No, you haven't. You heard the customer is always right. You never heard the client's always right. You heard the customer is always right. Who's the client? Whoever hired you. The customer is the person you got to treat fairly and honestly. So let me ask you, Mr. Salvador, you wrote Quiznos. Great. You wrote Quiznos. If I show up at Quiznos and I say, Mr. Salvador, here's the thing. I want a sandwich, but I'm not paying for it. What would you do? Are you going to offer me a sandwich? Or are you going to tell, well, my client, which is my employer, does not allow me to offer free sandwiches? You see what I'm saying? There's a big difference. Where I show up and I say I want food, and you're going to be like all smiles and say, Bruno, welcome, and here's your sandwich, and I'll treat you fairly and honestly, but no, I'm not giving it to you for free. You still have to pay, I'm sorry, right? Because you don't have the authority, right? You're not the employer. You don't have the authority of saying, sure, have the sandwich for free. But can you say, hey, boss, Quiznos owner or manager, whatever, can we give this sandwich for free to Bruno? If the client says yes, then why not? You understand? So in the scenario of a seller and a buyer, depending on who you represent, depending on which side you're at, right? That's whose interest you must uphold, who you have specific fiduciary duties to. So if you hire by the seller in this scenario is Quiznos, and the customer is whoever comes in to potentially buy the sandwich from the seller, right? Does that make sense? You don't represent the customer, you represent the client. Now, I'm not saying the client is the one that pays you, right? So just because they employed your services doesn't mean they're going to pay you. Because buyers, right, this is a quick recap and I'm going to show you all in a second. But the buyers usually don't pay for commission. The seller already agreed to. So if you are in a situation where you represent the buyer, the seller is the one paying, but the seller is your customer, not the client. The client is who hired you, who you represent. Make sure you understand this. The person or people who you represent are your clients. The ones you don't represent are customers, right? So again, when you put the Quiznos uniform, you represent Quiznos, not the customers. Simple as that. I represent, right here, New Direction School. You, in this scenario, you are my customers, but my client, who I need to uphold, is New Direction. You understand? Hope that helps. So going back to this, because it was very important, we just talked about all this stuff. Okay? We also need to disclose these things, because if clients and customers do not understand, we'll have a problem. Now, there's 4 different types of business relationships between brokers and clients, and these are called agencies. Each relationship imposes legal duties and responsibilities on the licensee. right? It also imposes responsibilities on the client being represented in the relationship. So the first one is buyer's agency. If you see buyer's agency, who do you represent? The buyer. Simple. You represent the buyer, okay? So in the single agency relationship, by the way, we have a whole chapter on this, chapter 11. But in the single agency relationship, the agent works only for the buyer and has fiduciary duties only to the buyer. That's it. I represent the buyer, not the seller. I'm going to do the best for my client. For the buyer, I'm going to bid low and make sure that I get the best value for my client, for the buyer, as low as I can. If you represent the seller, you're going to say, hey, no, we're countering high because my client wants higher. Do you understand? It's whoever you represent. That's where you're going to pull. So if you represent the seller, you represent only the seller. And your fiduciary duties are only to the seller. Period. But you can also represent both. Representing both is called disclosed dual agency. Now, dual agency means you represent, as it says, you created two agencies. What is agency? Employer-employee relationship. So if you created two agencies, you represent the seller and you represent the buyer. You represent both. But this key word right here is important. Because if I represent both and I don't tell either one, that's illegal. It has to be disclosed dual agency. What does that mean? I have to say, hey, buyer, I represent the seller. Are you okay with that? Seller, I represent the buyer. Are you okay with that? And if we get 2 thumbs up, we're good to go. Let's put it in writing and make sure everybody signs that they agree to this. So there has to be written consent to dual agency. There must be written consent to dual agency. So again, always remember, agency is the relationship you have with the client, with the principal, with the one that hired you. Would you be hired by both? Yes. Okay. Nina, is dual agency legal nationally? Well, in some states, but illegal in New Jersey. Dual agency is not illegal in New Jersey. Dual agency is not illegal. Undisclosed dual agency is. That's why it has to be disclosed. In almost every state, dual agency is 100% legal as long as it's disclosed. You must be aware that I represent the other party as well. Why? Because there's a conflict of interest. I'm getting paid from both sides. So you have the right to say, well, Bruno, what do you mean you're representing Brittany as well? Well, you're not representing my best interest then. If you're representing Brittany the seller, then how are you representing me, Nina the buyer? You understand? So you have the right to say no. But if you do agree to it, all we're saying is, we all understand that I intend to represent both parties. Let's put it in writing. Let's make sure both parties sign agreeing that it's okay for me to represent Brittany and Nina in the transaction. Okay? So it's not illegal as long as it is disclosed and in writing. Very important. The only thing that says here that's prohibited in New Jersey is you being compensated by both parties. What does that mean? It means that you cannot, let's say you charge the seller 6%, you cannot charge the buyer another fee. In this case, either the seller or the buyer pay you the full fee. One or the other. You understand? You cannot get compensation from both. One or the other pays the full fee. So, I think I just answered Nina. So let's say we negotiated with the seller 6%. That was the agreement, right? 6%. And the idea between the 6% for the 6% commission is that whoever is the listing agent gets 3%. Whoever is the buyer agent or the selling agent gets 3%, as an example. Right? So we tell the seller, hey, listen, this is what it is. For my services, usually the way it happens is I get a portion of the 6% and we pay out a portion to whoever brings a buyer as compensation, right? So we already predetermined 3-3 or 3.5, 2.5, whatever way we want to split. If you happen to represent both parties, you will get the 6% paid by the seller. You cannot have a separate agreement with the buyer, right? Let's say, hey, you got to give me an extra 2%, right? Extra. This is a big no-no. You will get your 6% paid by the seller, or in negotiations, we can say, well, buyer, you want to lowball it, no problem, but you're responsible for the commission. If that's what they agree, both parties, if that's what they agree, then in this instance, the seller does not pay. They gave that responsibility to the buyer. All right? But again, you're either getting paid from one side or from the other. You cannot get paid commission from one side and from the other. Okay? All right, next. The agent is required to explain to both parties how the representation will affect the fiduciary duties you owe to them. We already talked about this. The conflict of interest, because you're supposed to keep one side's interest more than the other, but when it comes to representing both, you're still going to be honest to both of them. You're still going to do the best you can. You're going to hold confidential most of the information. The only thing that you cannot pull towards one side or the other is the price. Everything else, you can fit this shoe and say, hey, I represent you, seller. To the best of my ability, I'll never talk about your divorce. I'll never talk about you losing your job. I'll never talk about you not being able to pay your mortgage. I'll never talk about these things if you don't tell me to talk about it. And then as the buyer, I'll never talk about how much money you have in the bank account, how you're qualified for more, whatever it is, right? Your need to move tomorrow. I'll never talk about that. I'll still protect you. I still owe specific duties. You understand? But as far as price, I cannot pull to one side and I cannot pull to the other side. That's going to be, go ahead, battle. That's it. We're the judge, the referee, we're in the middle. Fight. That's it. As far as price, when you represent both. Okay? Let's wait for Nina's question. What if the buyer loses their job? Then yes, now it's our fiduciary duty to the seller to say, hey, listen, well, we got to talk to the buyer first. But it's our fiduciary duty to the seller to say, listen, hey, they lost their job, so they might not be able to buy the house right now. There might be a few delays, whatever. Are you still up for it? If the seller says, don't worry about it, I really like this buyer, I'm sure they'll get a job, we're going to move forward. If the seller says yes, great. If the seller says, oh, they lost their job, no, cancel the deal, we're out. Then no problem. You did not breach your fiduciary duties because it's something that's relevant to the transaction. Remember, I said anything and everything that could affect the potential transaction must be disclosed. That's it. So if the buyer loses their job, if the seller could not clear title, doesn't matter who you represent, this is material fact, must be disclosed. Right? If you find out, you represent both, you find out that there's mold in the basement, then yes, you have to give that information to the buyer regardless of you representing both or none. Right? So when it's something that's a material fact, it must be disclosed. Okay? What are material facts? Things that could affect the transaction. Now it brings us to this, transaction broker. So I told you there's 4 different types of relationships that we recognize in New Jersey. Seller's agent, buyer's agent, disclosed dual agent where you represent both parties, and then there's this one, transaction broker. The name already says it all. You don't represent the seller, you don't represent the buyer. You represent the transaction. So there's no agency being created. You're not hired by anybody. They're all customers. They are all customers. The seller's a customer, the buyer's a customer. You don't represent them. You're a transaction broker. Can you be a transaction broker just for the seller? Or a transaction broker just for the buyer? Or a transaction broker for both? Yes, you can. Can I represent the seller as a seller's agent and then the buyer as a transaction broker? Yes, I can. All right? So I'm still facilitating the deal for the buyer, being a transaction broker. I'm still facilitating the deal, but I do not owe them any fiduciary duties. Right? I'm going to treat them like Quiznos. They sat down to eat. I'm going to treat them fairly and honestly. I'm still going to help them get their meal done, right? And expect them to pay. Simple as that. But for my client, I'm upholding their best interest. So I'm entitled to both commissions, right? Paid by the seller or by the buyer. I'm entitled to both commissions, but with just representing one of them. So this could be done again for a buyer, seller, or both, without representing either. Remember, agency is a relationship. Agency is a relationship. As a transaction broker, we are only facilitators. We are only facilitators. Okay? So I cannot even say that the buyer is my client. The moment you guys say the buyer's my client, or the moment you say, hey buyer, don't worry about it, I'm going to do everything possible for you to get this house. Now you became a buyer's agent. The moment you say it's my client, you became a buyer's agent. The moment you said to the buyer, I'm going to go above and beyond, they became a client and you became an agent, right? Even though it's not in writing, it's implied based on your actions. You guys understand? So agency, it's not only in writing, it could be implied agency. So again, as a transaction broker, we are managers of the transaction, assisting the parties equally. Questions? Anybody? YouTubers, Ruth, Yvette, whoever else is watching. Do you have any questions? It's very important you guys understand these, because there's so many questions, hypothetical questions in the exam about, you represent the seller and the buyer tells you this, what should you do, right? There's a lot of them. And if you don't understand which shoe you're filling in at that moment, right? Which hat you're wearing, right? It could affect the outcome of that question. So again, if I represent the seller, then I'm a listing agent, right? A buyer shows up at an open house and says, could you help me? Perfect, Ruth, thank you. So the buyer says, could you help me with the purchase? Sure, I can help. But because they did not specifically hire, who do I owe specific duties to? Still the seller. You understand? If the buyer says, so this is a potential question, if the buyer says, hey Bruno, here's an offer of $250,000, they're unrepresented. Here's an offer of $250,000, but I have more money in the bank. In case that offer does not go through, I have more money. One of the answers in the question is you have to be fair and honest with the customer, the buyer. They have to be fair and honest to say, hey, buyer, I appreciate your offer, first of all, and I appreciate you telling me that you have more money. But I represent the seller. You did not hire me. So anything you tell me, this is like the Miranda rights. Anything you tell me can and will be used against you in this transaction. So I will pass along any information you tell me because I represent who? The seller. So look for that answer. You represent the seller, so you have to pass along information. But you have to be fair and honest with the customer, even though you do not represent them. Okay? So again, a lot of questions around this type of scenarios, hypothetical questions. Would that make me a transaction broker for the buyer? Yeah, because I do not represent them. So yes, I'll be a transaction broker. Olga, transaction broker doesn't have a representing contract with either with the buyer or with the seller. It depends. I could go to a listing and say, hey, I will list this property as a transaction broker. So I'm already telling the seller I don't represent you, so don't expect much from me. Right? I'll do my best to get the transaction through. I'll facilitate the transaction beginning to end, but I do not owe you, seller, any duties. Like, I don't have to be, I have to be obviously fair and honest. I have to disclose stuff, but I will not uphold your best interest over anybody else's. That's the difference. Can I represent the seller as being my client and the buyer as being a customer, or vice versa? Sure. All you need to understand, again, is that this relationship is not an agency. And if I do not represent the buyer, then that's a customer. If I do not represent the seller, then that's a customer. If I do not represent either, then they're both customers. Can I be a transaction broker for both the seller and the buyer? Sure. Do I still get paid? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And by the way, this is the OK sign. There's nothing else. Just in case somebody's wondering. Things are getting crazy out there. All right, we're gonna skip sub-agency. Now, in New Jersey, we have this form called Consumer Information Statement, or CIS. Now, the CIS is and I'm putting in big letters because this is not a contract. The CIS is a notice. It's a disclaimer. It's a disclosure. It's me telling you, hey guys, in New Jersey, this is how we could represent. So it's literally a 2-pager that must be signed by the seller or the buyer, or both if you represent both, or if you don't represent neither, but you're helping both in a transaction. But it's literally a statement that says, hey, I could be seller's agent, buyer's agent, disclosure agent, transaction broker, or I can even represent the seller in one property as a seller's agent or a transaction broker in others. So the CIS is only a disclosure, not a contract. It's not a contract. It's just telling you I intend to work with you in this matter, in these matters as a customer, or I'm sorry, transaction broker, or as an agent. This is only for 1 to 4 family or vacant 1 family lots. So this is a requirement when you go help somebody sell or buy a 1 to 4 family or a vacant single lot, right? You go help somebody buy any of these, you must present the CIS, okay? Now, when must you provide the CIS? Sorry. When must you provide the CIS? This is very, very, very important. When must you provide the CIS? At the first contact. So the moment somebody calls you and says, hey, Bruno, I want to buy a house. Oh, stop right there. I understand you want to buy a house, and I appreciate you thinking of me, but state of New Jersey requires me to disclose some stuff before we begin. Is that okay? Right? If they say yes, then you start disclosing. If they say no, then unfortunately we need to sit down as soon as possible so I can disclose this paper to you. It's very important. We have to, right? If it's a seller, hey, I want to sell my house. Same thing. Stop them right in their tracks, and you disclose this. Now, this is a requirement, but I do challenge always. All you guys, call agencies. Call agents that you know. Call them up and say, hey, think about buying a house, and see what they tell you. Most people are going to be like, most agents are going to be like, okay, is that a 1, 2, 3, 4 family? Where are you looking to? They go right into the deal versus, hey, did you know anything you tell me right now? If I don't represent you as a buyer's agent, it could affect the transaction because I will pass along that information. You understand? We have to disclose this stuff. In fact, if the first contact is on the telephone, you're required to verbally explain the different agency relationships. Again, seller's agent, buyer's agent, disclosure agent, or transaction broker over the phone. And then as soon as we sit down, we're going to provide it in writing at a follow-up. Failure to do so can potentially result in your suspension or revocation. Ruth is saying we should always have it with us. Okay, so I'm going to tell you this. Everything is going over to digital, right? If you are an active realtor, right? What I would tell you is to always have paper forms, because just in case your phone died, just in case your laptop battery died, okay? Just make sure you always have the paper forms with you, all right? If you're gonna deal mainly with residential, then have the residential forms available with you. That's it, always, right? Everything else is gonna be on your phone, on your computer, or tablet. So have a combination. And you should know at least the basics of it. So there's a link right here. And you can get a copy of the CIS right there. Okay. This is the CIS. It's a 2-pager. And you can have this when you're speaking to somebody. I'm sure most people know right now how to be on a call and be able to switch to this. And then you disclose to them. But at least, the very least, this is very important that you guys learn the CIS. At the very least. Okay, this is the first part of the CIS. At the very least. Go here. Explain this. At the very least, over the phone. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And look, it says, very simple. As a seller's agent or sub-agent, I, the licensee, represent the seller, and all material information supplied to me by the buyer will be told to the seller. So I represent the seller. If you tell me anything, I will use it and tell the seller. As a buyer's agent, I, the licensee, represent the buyer, and all material information supplied to me by the seller will be told to the buyer. As a disclosure agent, I, licensee, represent both parties. However, I may not, without express permission, disclose that the seller will accept less than the listing price or that the buyer will pay a price greater than the offered price. And finally, number 4, as a transaction broker, I, the licensee, do not represent either the buyer or the seller, and all information, right here on top, all information I acquire from one party may be told to the other party. So over the phone, at least these 4 you should know by heart, at least. And it's very simple. But then as soon as you sit down, you got to go over all of this, all of it, so they clearly understand the duties that that you owe them or not. And then look, it says, this is not a contract. It is provided for informational purposes only. And the sellers or landlords must sign. And look what it says. By signing this consumer information statement, I acknowledge that I received this statement from New Direction Realty, as an example, prior to discussing my motivation to sell or lease my desired selling or leasing price with one of the reps. Oh, sorry. Look what it says there. Prior to discussing my motivation to sell or lease. Prior. It's not, hey, let me show you houses. Hey, let me look at your house and see if we could. No. Prior to anything, this was disclosed to you, and now you're signing. If you represent the buyer, or if you're sitting down with the buyer, same thing. Again, the word prior. I received it prior Okay? And they sign. And then you sign as well. I, Bruno Quintella, right, New Direction Realty, intend, as of this time, to work with you as, look at the keywords, intend. I'm not saying I'm going to represent you as a seller's agent or as a buyer's agent or a transaction broker. What I'm saying is I intend. We still did not contract. We still did not get a listing. We still did not get an offer. We're still not contracted. It's just informational purpose. It's just a notice. So I intend, as of this time, to work with you as seller's agent only. Check that box. Buyer's agent only. Check that box. I love this one. Seller's agent and disclosure agent if the opportunity arises. So if a buyer shows up in the future, right? I represent you as a seller's agent, but if a buyer shows up in the future, I intend to represent the buyer. Okay? And vice versa, right? It could have been a buyer's agent and then dual agent, right? Or transaction broker only. This is the most common nowadays. Transaction broker only. So I do not literally represent you. I'm just helping you facilitate the transaction to the best of my ability, right? So that is it. And this must be signed and dated. Okay? The biggest thing that happens in the real estate business, unfortunately, even brokers will train you on this, and that's a big mistake because it's a liability. But they'll tell you, hey, don't worry about it. Once you get the listing, put this paper there, make sure they sign, don't date, and then you backdate it to the day you met them. You put the date later. Like, come on. That's fraud in itself. They did not know better. In fact, a few years ago, I had a student. He was a cop in Linden, and he told me that, listen, Bruno, I only saw this document at closing. Like, wait a minute. So you're telling me that you did not know that you were being represented as there was the representation was a transaction broker, and you did not know what that meant? I didn't even know what that was. I thought I was being represented by the agent. That alone could be a lawsuit. And remember, in New Jersey, we're going to go over this as well, but in New Jersey, you have up to 6 years to sue somebody. So if I felt that you were not representing my best interest as you claimed to be, but again, I did not know because I was not explained this, okay? Then I can sue you in that transaction for not upholding my interest as you said you were going to. Okay? So it's very, very important that you guys present this ASAP. All right, let's see, Nina. Why don't they have the vice versa option for the buyer there? Can you write it? Okay, there's different CISs. This is the CIS C. Usually we use the other ones, but one does say you can represent the buyer and become a dual agent in the future if the opportunity arises. Yep. Look, the 6 years again. You got to keep this for 6 years. Right? Again, an agency relationship, we talked about this in chapter 11 as well. An agency relationship is a legal, agency is a legal relationship created when the broker and client agree to have the broker represent the client when dealing with third parties. The broker is referred to as the agent and the client the principal. And the agency is created by contractual agreements between the broker and the client, not by who pays the commission. So again, if the client is the buyer and the seller agreed to pay the commission, which usually that's what happens in the listing, do I drop my client and I go do dealings for the customer, for the seller? No. Agency agreement is based on who hired you, not who pays you. So your best interest is your client's best interest, whether it's the buyer or the seller. Okay? As discussed in Chapter 11, agency relationships terminate in any of the several ways. Completion of all obligations, that means we closed. Mutual agreement of the involved parties, say, hey, listen, no longer, we're done. You walk away, I walk away, we're happy. Expiration of the agreement, death or incapacity of either party, abandonment or renunciation by the agent, destruction or condemnation of the property, revocation of the agent's license, breach of contract, or bankruptcy of either party. So that's ways to terminate that agreement. Disclosure duties. You guys should know by now, again, that anything and everything that could affect the proposed transaction must be disclosed. Period. All right. We're going to start with the New Jersey Real Estate Full Disclosure Act. If we're talking about out-of-state properties, or if you're talking about huge planned unit developments, then there's something called a public offering. That public offering must be registered with the state to say, hey, listen, it's not from this state or is a large development, and these are the implications with it. So there has to be information on estimated completion date for improvements, applicable fees, property's proximity to public service facilities, hazards and risks, right? And the public offering, this is not the POS you're thinking about. The public offering statement right here, public offering statement, the POS, must be provided prior to the buyer signing a sales contract. In this type of transaction, a 7 calendar day rescission or cancellation rights for the buyer of these properties must be included. Okay? 7 calendar day. Nina, if the broker abandons a listing, can the client sue? Yes. If there's a damage to it, yes. Okay. Material facts and information. Again, a material fact or piece of information, as we said before, is defined as something that, if known, might have caused a buyer or seller to make a different decision about entering into a sale or rental contract. So if I know about something that's happening with a property, would I offer more? Would I offer less? It doesn't matter what I would offer, but if it could change my current offer, I must be given this info. So the information is important, significant, and essential to a reasonable person when making a decision. It may be information that the agent knows or suspects that the buyer would consider important or significant. New Jersey regulations require licensee to make a reasonable efforts to obtain all material information about the physical condition of the property. So here's the thing. We don't have to go up in the roof and see the condition of the property, right? We don't have to knock down walls and see what's behind the wall to see if there's any issues. We don't have to. What's required of us is to ask questions and do a visual inspection of the property. So a full 360 of the property. We need to know, based on our experience, based on our knowledge and skills, we need to know, okay, everything looks to be fine. Oh, what is that spot up there? So we need to be able to identify certain things and bring it up to the client so they can potentially order an inspection. Okay? So anything you see that could affect or potentially affect the transaction must be disclosed to a client or a customer. Okay? Again, water leakage in the basement, mold inside the living structure, cracks in the structure of the foundation. This is visible. If we can see it, got to talk about it. Okay? Simple. Required disclosures do not include social conditions or psychological impairments. We talked about this in the previous chapter. Like, we don't have to say, hey, this is a noisy neighborhood. No. Do you like the house? Did you go around the neighborhood? How'd you feel about it? Simple. They decide. Because look, your neighbor might, the person you're trying to help buy, might be a noisy person as well. Never know. So maybe they fit right into the neighborhood. It's something that does not affect the property value. You know, something that does not affect the property value. Oh, there's loud parties, barking. That's exactly where I like to live. I like noise. Some people like to be in the middle of the woods. I'll go crazy if it's more than 2 days in the middle of the woods. I love the woods, by the way. But I'll go crazy if I live there. Right? I have a cousin that moved from the middle of Newark to the middle of the woods, and he's been living there for almost 10 years, and he's happy. Like, good for you. I'll go visit once in a while, and, you know, I might stay past midnight once or twice, but no. It doesn't work for me. I need the movement. I need the, you know, I need the noise. Somewhat. Too much noise is not good either for me. So everybody's different. The point is, the house is the same. The value of the house does not change based on the opinion of psychological or psychological conditions. Again, these situations do not affect the physical condition of the property, which is what must be disclosed. All right? Now, sellers must be aware that they are required to disclose latent defects. What are latent defects? They are hidden. Latent defects are stuff you cannot see, but the seller knows. I'll give I have examples for everything because Ruth said me. What you like to? Sorry, let's pause for a second. I need to know what me means. Ruth, you're saying me like you like the noise. You're saying me like you like to be in the middle of woods, or you like me like you want to be like in between, like not too calm, but not too loud. Which one is the me? So you live in the woods and you like it? I heard crazy stuff about the woods. That's pretty much where all crazy movies happen. Same. Right? You want to talk about horror movies? It's always a foggy day in the middle of the woods and all of a sudden, done. Nope. Not going to happen. Like I said, for a couple hours I'll be there, no problem. Anyway, Ahmed, you asked me about plumbing. So, yeah, so I was going to say that. I have an example, something that happened recently, and I have a bunch of examples, always. Something happened recently, actually to a family member. Bought the house. Representation is an issue, right? So bought the house, not with me, because that's what family members do. So bought the house, and closing day happened. The very next day, they move in. And they open up the waters, you know, they're trying to do a little rehab to the house. Open up the waters, and unfortunately, there was some type of backup. So just by turning on the water, everything comes into the house. It was perfect because they had a nice, their basement became a private pool. Unfortunately, not that clean, but became a private pool. Right? Who doesn't want a pool in the basement? Anybody? Right? So they bought the house, and all of a sudden there's this issue with plumbing. Like it was not there before. Like never. We've never seen it. We have no idea. Right? My family member could easily sue the seller for undisclosed facts because sewage backup does not happen overnight. It starts building up. It's almost like it's rare. It's rare, very rare that something, oh, it just happened today. Right? This is something that happens over some period of time by lack of maintenance or old pipes, and you can notice the issue, right? The way it happened, there's no way the seller did not know about it. Okay. So these are hidden defects, and the seller must be aware that failure to disclose these latent or hidden defects could make the buyer rescind the contract and the seller becoming financially liable for damages caused by the defect. Okay, so Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, I'm like your doctor. If you don't tell me everything, there's no way I can market this property properly. I need to know all the issues that you have in order for me to know exactly how to market it. You understand? So have the clients be upfront with you. And if they don't disclose, I'm like, listen, I'm not saying there's something or there isn't. What I'm saying is by law, if you don't tell me, I want to let you know you could be liable later on for damages. Or the buyer, as soon as they find out, if there's anything they find out, they can cancel the contract midway. Right? We don't want to be 2 or 3 months into it and then everything stops because they found issues. Does that make sense? So always be upfront with the client and let him with a seller and let him know. Disclose, disclose, disclose. Simple. Okay. In fact, we even asked them to fill out a form called the seller's property condition disclosure statement. So seller, make sure you fill this out to the best of your ability because you know the house better than I do. I just got here and I just saw it looks okay, and I'm listing based on current market conditions, but I don't know the real condition of your property. So fill this out to the best of your ability, right? And that is to protect you. All right, Nina has a question. Robin has a question. What are their plumbing? What if there are plumbing issues? Do you have them fix it or include in your marketing? It depends. Sometimes we can include in the marketing if the seller, look, the majority of the time sellers don't have money. They're selling for a reason, so they don't have money. And we'll go with asbestos as well, the same thing. Maybe they don't have the money to remove it, right, or remediate. So can we say, hey, Mr. Seller, you're put the house on the market for $300,000. We'll do this. We'll do your $300,000, but you have to give us $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in credit. That will happen at closing, right? So we'll match the $300,000 so it doesn't hurt you, the seller, right? But from the sale, at closing, I want a credit towards the rehab. Could it happen that way? Yes. Could it be like, listen, you know what? I'll put out of my pocket, but I'm offering you $270, $260, $250 because of this condition. You understand? So all these things could be taken care of. Usually I'd like to ask the seller, hey, is there any way you can fix this stuff? Like, be upfront. Do you have the money to fix? Could you fix? Because here's the thing. For you, it could be a $5,000 fix, let's say. But a buyer will lower or lowball you $40,000 for the same thing you could have done for $5,000. So it's up to you. Oh, I really don't have money. Well, then this is what we're going to do. We're going to put it on the market. We have to disclose, and we'll negotiate the 40, whatever they put. Let's say $40,000. We'll negotiate to 10, maybe. Right? Do you guys understand? So it becomes a negotiating point versus, hey, I fixed it, good to go, it's worth top dollar. Right? So you have to understand your clients. Not all clients are able to pump that type of money into the property. Most of the times, like I said, people sell because they have to. Not because they want to. They have to. Okay? There's nobody that I know, or barely anybody that I would know, that wakes up one day and says, I'm going to sell my house just because. Barely anybody. There has to be a reason behind it. And most of the times, like I said, is they need to sell for that reason. They don't have the money for it, but they need to sell. Job relocation, divorces, pregnancies, like, hey, the baby's on the way, we need to upgrade, right? So we have this amount of months to upgrade, right? Death in the family, a lot of stuff. Like, there could be a reason, a motivation for people to sell, okay? And then there's those people that are loaded with money and just say, hey, I'm tired of this house, let me get another one, right? There's also those kind of people. Like I said, barely anyone wakes up and says, I'm selling because. Anyway, you guys want to know, this is on the national portion as well, you guys want to know insurance claims against the property within the past 5 years, we get what's called the CLUE report. CLUE is a comprehensive loss underwriting exchange. And it gives you insurance claims on the property for the past 5 years. Okay. All right, disclosures to the seller. This is simple. Again, these are the disclosures. We already covered all this, so I'm going to go just to 2 key points here. One of them is, like Nina was asking, the buyer's potential inability to acquire financing. Yes, you must disclose, period. Buyer cannot buy, you must disclose. Because again, a family member I love family members. So family member went with somebody, and they listed their property. So one was a buyer. This case is a seller. They listed their property, and the buyer's agent brought a buyer, right? But never disclosed that the buyer midway lost their job. Fortunately, due to the pandemic, all lost their job, right? Um, the agent notified my family member's agent, right? Not me, my family member's agent, that the buyer had lost their job, but they're actively looking for another one, and we're gonna keep up with this. So no problem. We can still close by that date. I can guarantee we'll close on that date, right? So my family member's agent knew that the buyer had no job, even though he does not represent the buyer. Knew that the buyer had no job. Don't you think it would be prudent to go like, hey, listen, here's the thing. The buyer just lost their job. They already have another promising job on the way. So they'll still be able to do this. Maybe we'll have a week or two delay in the closing, max 1 month delay in the closing. Are you guys okay with that? Right? Or should we drop it and just move to another buyer? Right? That's it. Be upfront about it. Right? But no. A week away from the closing, right? We start talking about something. 3 days before the closing, yeah, they're not going to be able to close because the buyer lost a job 4 weeks ago. Like, kidding me? I could have dumped this buyer and moved to another one right away. We're just wasting time. You understand? So these are situations. That will come up, and it's your responsibility. And you cannot say, I mean, you can say, but it's your liability. You cannot say, oh, I forgot. I meant to tell you, but I forgot. The moment you say that, that's it. You implicated yourself, and yes, you could be liable for damages. Because here's the thing. The seller, in this scenario, the seller already bought another house and is moving to the other house. So now they're stuck with 2 mortgages. It's a wrong thing to do anyway. They shouldn't have done it like that. But they're stuck with 2 houses, with 2 mortgages, right? Understand these things. Understand your clients, their needs, what can be, what they need to do or not. So yes, you have the responsibility to disclose, regardless of who you represent. You must disclose. All right. The agent must also present all offers. This is key. All offers, right? And this has to be presented immediately, which in New Jersey we say within 24 hours. All offers. Oh, but that offer is only a $1 offer. It's an offer, must be presented, right? The only thing that we can reject in an offer is if the seller clearly said, and by the way, always advise your sellers to do this. If the seller clearly said, all offers must be accompanied by proof of funds or pre-approval mortgage letter, then that's the only time you as an agent can say, that's an incomplete offer. I'm not taking it. You understand? So as I said earlier, put it in writing and show me the money, right? So if the seller clearly specified that, then boom, that's it. You're able to reject those offers. Okay, we talked about this. Off-site conditions, real quick. What does this mean? Off-site. Off-site. Let me know in the chat. Off-site. Not on the location, not on the premises. So it's not on your property. Why do we have to disclose something that's not on our property? Okay, great. Swamp nearby. I don't know where you live, but okay. Well, I see it based on the palm trees behind you, maybe. Anyway, so yes, it could be something near your property, but how? Jackson, okay. That's why they put Six Flags there. Anyway, so there's a big old swamp. Now, what was I gonna say? How does something that's not on your property, a swamp for instance, how does something not on your property affect your property? Why do we have to disclose something that's not on your property? Let me know in the chat. May impair the property at a later time. Absolutely. May impair the property at a later time. So for instance, let's say, forget swamps for a second, let's do the most common thing near a property. A gas station. Train station. Right? The railroad. Could these things affect your property in some way? Yeah. Right? So New Jersey says, there's anything near your property, right? If there's anything near your property, Fallon, perfect. External obsolescence, absolutely. So if there's anything near your property that you can control, so therefore obsolescence, as Fallon just wrote, if there's anything near your property that could have environmental hazardous charge, electric transformer substations or overhead utility transmission lines conducting 240 volts or whatever, gas transmission lines, sanitary landfills, airport safety zones, public wastewater treatment facilities, all these could affect your property. So if you have any of these things, for example, these are examples, anything's near your property, then we need to disclose, this is a lawsuit back in 1995, we need to disclose that if it's a new construction, we need to disclose this information within 5 days of execution of a contract. So, hey, congratulations on the contract, but by the way, right over there, like half-mile up, for instance, is a hazardous waste dumping site, as an example. Now, could that affect your property? Yes, because water, like rain, could bring all those chemicals into the ground. Groundwater travels, it could affect your property. So you have the right to cancel a contract within 5 business days, right? If it's a resale in New Jersey does not include the same rights. What is the difference between new construction and resale? So new construction, nobody lived there before. We knocked it down, we built brand new, nobody lived there, okay? Or it was just land and we built brand new, nobody lived there. A resale is I'm living here and I've been living for the past few months or few years, right? And if I'm glowing green, you can glow green too. It's not a problem. Don't worry about it. If nobody lived there before, we'll give it a try with you guys first. If you're not up for it, it's okay to cancel within 5 business days. That's pretty much what it says. New constructions, you can cancel. Resale, hey, if they dealt with it, you can deal with it. It sucks. I don't even know why this exists like this, but it is what it is. If they dealt with it, you can deal with it. Consumer fraud. Speaking of which, right? Consumer fraud. This one's simple. There's different types of frauds. There's intentional, and there's obviously honest or innocent or negligent fraud. The intentional is the one that you said, hey, let's hide this. That's intentional. So there was some type of deception, fraud, or false pretense or promise into the property, okay? And there must be an injured party. Now, there's affirmative misrepresentation. That means you're making an untrue statement of fact, whether or not the licensee knew that the statement is untrue. So sometimes we don't know, but because we never asked, we intentionally we affirmed that misrepresentation. Again, negligent or unintentional could be part of this. Knowing omission. So knowingly concealing or suppressing or omitting material fact that is known to the licensee, or law violation. Violating statutes or regulations that are specific to the situation, and were enacted to interpret the act itself. What are the penalties? $10,000 for first offense, $20,000 for second and subsequent. What I usually say as far as fines, guys, your first few deals of the year are to pay for the violations that you'll commit, and then the rest of the deals of the year is your profit. So make sure you always put $10,000, $20,000 aside just in case. It's a joke, obviously, okay? For those of you still serious about it, it's a joke. Make sure you have insurance because we make mistakes. And for everything else, ask questions always. Do not assume or presume. Ask questions. You know why? Because that can help you avoid these penalties. If you ask questions, right? You cannot say, I did not know the information provided was false or deceptive. Then we're going to have to be able to point to someone. You made a diligent effort to ascertain the truth, meaning you asked questions. Also, you relied on information in the home inspection report or a government employee or the seller's property condition disclosure statement. Literally, as I said in agency chapter, as I said, point the finger, not your monkey. Right? So, Mr. Weather, you'll understand this when we get there. There's a quick video that I'll play, like a 3-minute video that I'll play. But not your monkey. Point the fingers, it's okay. The home inspection report says no issues. Why am I at fault? I asked, right? Government employee gave a CO, right? They said it's okay to live here, right? And the house collapsed. Not my fault, I'm not the professional. And who knows the house better than the seller, right? They wrote it. They stated their fault. Right? Simple. Now, is it possible that you're going to be able to avoid fully the penalties? Yeah, it's possible. Is there a chance that even though you're relying on other people's professional opinion, is there a chance that you'll get dragged into it and still have to pay something? Well, that's why we have insurance. Right? Because it is possible that you were negligent. It is possible that you were careless. It is possible that you should have asked the question, but you didn't. It is possible. Just like when driving a car, right? We are very careful, right? We're having coffee while doing our hair, shaving, doing makeup, right? We're very careful. Is it possible that a car gets in front of us and makes us do other things because, you know, we're paying so much attention to the road, right? Or maybe we're driving and watching TikTok and other stuff on your phone? Yeah, it is possible. That's why we have insurance, right? That's what protects us from the potential mistakes, right? And those of you that laughed at the whole TikTok thing and makeup and all that, you know what I'm talking about, huh? Anyway, so again, that's why we have errors and omissions like we spoke in the chapter for risk management. Ahmed, you asking, home inspection report usually signed by the seller? So the home inspection report is issued to the buyer because the buyer is the one that brings the home inspector. So it's not signed. The seller's property condition statement, yes, that will be signed by the seller, and then once the buyer receives it, it has to sign as well, acknowledging that they received a copy of it. All right. All right, conduct of business. We already talked about all this, the fact that you have to treat everybody fairly and honestly, unless they're your client, obviously. You will be disciplined if you breach your fiduciary duties. Like if you represent the client, but then, you know what, customer, here's the thing, just offer anything. They're desperate. Right? You don't represent the customer. You don't represent the buyer in this particular instance, right? So you telling the buyer, just offer anything because your client is desperate, you just breached your fiduciary duty of confidentiality, for instance, right? Failure to meet the required standard of care. You didn't care enough to ask questions or check the potential of the property or even properly market the property. You didn't care enough. All right, conflict of interest, misrepresentation, and so on. So being guilty of any of the above can potentially cause loss of a seller or a buyer, no big deal. Loss of a commission, no big deal, but now big deal. Civil lawsuit or criminal prosecution of the license and disciplinary sanctions such as license suspension or revocation. So losing a seller or a buyer will get another one, right? We just swipe left and that's another one. Boom. Loss of commission, all right, so I don't get paid now, I'll get another one later. No problem. Lawsuit, losing your license, yeah, big problem. Okay. Oh, by the way, as most people, I don't know if you guys ever realize this, but most people that lie, right? Most people that lie, they tend to keep on lying, and then they believe their lie, right? It becomes their nature. Like, no, this lie is true. It's so true that I've been saying it for years, even though everybody knows it's a lie. But I've been saying it became true, right? Let's start with that one. People that steal, they tend not to steal once. Oh, if nobody caught me, I can do this again, right? So what I'm trying to say here as a realtor is, unfortunately, a lot of times what happens is people get caught in, you know what? I signed for them. Nobody said anything. Or, yeah, let's paint this basement and nobody will notice that there's mold, right? It flies once, flies twice, we're good. But don't forget, up to 6 years, somebody can go back and sue you. And again, the problem is people get comfortable. And then all of a sudden there's FBI and breaking down doors and arresting 30-something people as it happened a couple of years ago, right? Because nobody caught us for all those years. We could have done whatever we wanted for all those years. Investigations take a long time. But once they have you, because, sorry, you're dumb enough to repeat. One thing is repeat business, another thing is repeat deceit, right? Even rhymes. But don't do it, okay? Don't. It's not worth it. It might fly once if it happened, like you made a mistake and you're like, oh my God, nobody caught that. All right? It happened. Let it slide. Fine. Now don't be like, oh, nobody caught that, so we can do it again. Don't. You will lose later on. Because if there's an investigation, this happened last year. There's an investigation. They'll start off, as an example, happened with an attorney. It's the second attorney that I know recently that they went and closed his business temporarily, because you know how it is. They arrest you, they say you committed a crime, and then you're able to still walk out and do your business until actually convicted. So until you're convicted, for some reason, they still allow you to conduct business. So this particular attorney, these two attorneys actually, they're involved in massive fraud, alleged fraud, right? And as soon as they open up the books of this particular, all the transactions of this particular attorney, who do you think is there? Realtors, right? And now, because of one thing, they'd be like, hey, what happened here? You're not even related to that particular fraud that was being committed, but in the middle of a transaction that they're looking at, what happened here? And then it trickles. It's like you're throwing pebbles into the pond. You know, you have those ripples, right? They will reach you. All I'm saying is do the right thing so you can sleep at night, right? Very comfortable, and not have to worry about FBI knocking on your door. Bless you, Nidia. Okay. She's allergic to fraud. Sneezed. All right. Next, who remembers the Truth in Lending Act or Regulation Z? Who remembers TILA or Regulation Z? Let me know what it is. TILA, let me know in the chat. TILA, what do you remember about it? Come on. Anybody? YouTubers, let me know what you think about it. TILA. Regulation Z. I don't have it highlighted because we have a whole thing on chapter 17 about it, but TILA and Regulation Z. Giving a chance for everybody to answer. Come on. Heather, there you go. You have to disclose the loan amounts, I think. Okay. Ruth, does it have to do with the borrower as well? Yep. Has to do with a contract? No. They're flipping pages. These things got to be in the tip of your tongue. Okay. I'm going to guess lenders have to disclose interest rate. All right. Heather, all fees in the loan amount. Yes. So guys, the Truth Lending Act and Regulation Z are about you knowing the true cost of credit, right? So knowing how much the loan is going to cost you. Absolutely. Very, very important. They have to disclose not only the interest rate, but the APR, the annual percentage rate. Annual percentage rate. So being honest, yes, about the funding, about the full cost. Very good. Heather wrote, I know you have 3 days to review. Yep. So, it's a written disclosure about the actual credit terms and rates. So you need to know Regulation Z or TILA, it's about the true cost of obtaining financing. Now, marketing is very important. I'm going to talk about the 3 days in a second, okay, Heather? But yes, you have 3 days. They have 3 days to provide you the loan estimate. And if you agree to proceed, then we move forward. Otherwise, there's no commitment. When you advertise, the reason why you need to know TILA and Regulation Z as far as advertisement is because some of the things that you might include in your ad have to include further disclosures. So if I include a particular dollar amount or percentage of down payment, you need to remember, not everybody qualifies in the same way, right? Who has the same credit score? Raise your hand if you all have the same credit score. Nobody, right? Who has the same job? Does anybody here have the same? We don't even know which job you have, right? We just know Quiznos. Who has the same income? Because everybody's different. Everybody has their own financial fingerprint, just like we have our own individual fingerprints. And I cannot make a statement saying, hey, pay only this a month or just this down payment. You might not qualify for that program, right? The number of payments or number of years to repay, the dollar amount of any payment, or amount of any interest rate or finance charge. The moment I say any of these are triggering terms. And if they're triggering terms, they trigger additional disclosures. So now, if I said $1,500 a month, I must also explain the terms of repayment over the entire life of the loan, the dollar amount or percentage of down payment, the annual percentage rate or APR, and the rate of any fixed rate over the life of the loan, that any payment indicated does not include taxes or insurance. So I have to state, hey, we don't know how much your taxes are going to be, how much insurance is going to be, because this is random, right? This is just the financing portion. And the rate or payment of changes for any rate that's not fixed, so ARMs, adjustable rate mortgages. If it's a general term, general terms do not require additional disclosures. So general terms is me saying, hey, financing is available. I don't know if you qualify, but financing is available. right? It's liberal, it's general, it's not specific. Does that make sense? Negotiable terms. Negotiable how? I don't know. Let's sit down and talk. It's negotiable, right? Loan assumption, specific amount of mortgage available, or owner financing. These are all possibilities. These are not guarantees. Do you understand what I'm saying? These are statements as a guarantee. That's the problem. These are possibilities, the general terms. We're not saying you qualify for financing. We just say it's available, right? We're not saying which terms are going to be. We're saying it's negotiable, and so on. Other requirements, the words, right? For any offer of financing, APR, disclosures printed close to related information not concealed in any way, and oral ads must state clearly and provide a toll-free number for additional information. If you're doing rental referrals, you have to have a written contract. We talked about this as well before, but we're going over it again. If you're talking about rental referrals, so you're helping somebody rent, so either you're helping the landlord or a tenant, and you expect to get paid, you must have a written contract with the prospective tenant or homeowner. You must have a written contract. Can I help somebody rent, get paid, and not have any dealings with it or license? No. Contract, you must have date and term of the contract, services to be performed, fees that will be charged, refund policy as well, and you must be licensed salesperson. All right? So can you just help somebody rent and get paid for it? No. Anyone who takes part in a real estate transaction for another party for a fee, commission, or valuable consideration must have a license. If you expect to get paid, you must have a license. Okay? So again, contract. You cannot advertise stuff that does not exist. A lot of agents do this. You're laughing, Robin. This is true. A lot of agents do this. Beautiful 3-bedroom, 2-bath available in Newark, Ironbound section. Prime real estate right next to ferry station. I'm sorry, to Penn Station, which will get you to New York in 15 minutes. Right? That's golden right there in that advertisement. And people start calling you and like, oh, it's no longer available. It was never available. It doesn't exist. You use that ad as clickbait. You're trying to get people to call you. Right? Something that does not exist cannot be advertised. Right? So very careful with your advertisements as an agent. Obviously, you must have permission from the landlord to refer prospective tenants to that property, right? And make sure you have written permission. And this one might be a question in the state exam or a school exam. The agency must consistently check an advertised property's availability every day and the listed unadvertised property availability every 3 days. What's the difference between these? Advertised, we're talking about Craigslist. We're talking about Facebook Marketplace. We're talking about newspapers. It's advertised. That means the general public has access to it. If you're advertising something that expired already or it's taken care of already, so it's not available on the market, then every day you must check that availability so you can drop your advertisement immediately. Okay? If it's simply listed, right? Simply listed, then it's every 3 days. Because who has access to listings most of the times? Not many people go to the MLS, to the public side of the MLS to search properties. Not many. So between realtors, if it's been 3 days and it's no longer available, you know what? Got to drop it. So every 3 days, you must check the availability of that particular listing. Okay? Must have enough telephone lines and employees to receive and answer calls. An agency must not charge a fee higher than $25 before the tenant obtains housing unless the higher fee is deposited into the agent escrow account or held until completion of the contract, unless the agency posts cash security as approved by the commission. All right. So what is this $25 that we're charging? One thing is a background check. I cannot charge you an application fee for the agency more than $25. But if the background check, and that's a separate service that we're paying for, I can charge you for that. Right? Do you understand? I cannot charge as a application fee, my money, give it to me now. No, cannot do that. Some agencies were doing that. Some agencies, I'm giving you all the rotten stuff so you know how it works. Some agencies were charging anywhere between $75 to $100 for application fee, right? But without describing what was used for. A lot of agencies were collecting, let's say if I put an ad right now here, I was giving the example here in Newark, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. If I put for $2,000 in the Ironbound section, I'm gonna get like 30 or 40 calls in one day, right? In one day. So imagine the whole week, right? So, but let's say just one day. If I charge everybody $75, right? Look at the amount of money that I'm making one day. If I'm not actually doing or running the application, as a lot of agencies were doing, right? They would tell you, hey, you don't qualify. That's all. No, I have to give you a copy of your report because that's what you paid for. You understand? I have to give you something saying where you approved or not. I have to provide that to you, and you're entitled to dispute that with, this is where we got it from, Equifax, Experian, whatever it is that we get it from, and you're entitled to go and get those records. Simple. But I have to provide you with that. Back in the day, what they were doing, and probably still happening now, back in the day, what they were doing was literally collecting fees, and then people would forget about it, or I know this is what I have to do everywhere I go, pay a application, and they were just pocketing that money. So imagine, just at $10, let's say it's $10 I'm charging, 30 to 40 applications a day, just at $10. The numbers are way more than that, 75 to 100, but just at $10, I will be pocketing $300 to $400 a day. Do the math. A week. Do the math. Month. Why would I work? Let's do applications all day. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's illegal. Can I charge $25 and not do anything? Well, technically that's what they're saying. You can charge $25, no more than that. But then it goes to the point where you have to provide some type of service. You have to actively be looking for a property for the client. Are you guys understanding this? You cannot just charge and walk away. Okay? Is that clear? All right. There's a lot of ways to make money in real estate. Rentals is great. And yes, you can make these $25 fees all day. You can. But make sure you try to honestly find properties for the clients. That's all I'm trying to say, or customers. All right. Felix has a question. Hold on. Ambulance, cops, as usual. All right, since advertising something, I'm still trying to understand how things work here in Newark, and I've been here for so many years. Whether it's an ambulance cop or whatever it is, I hear the sirens coming all the way. As soon as it stops right here, they turn off the sirens. Like, is this hey, let's bother Bruno? Literally. It was going on, I'm here waiting, and all of a sudden, rip. Done. They reached destination. Anyway, question from Felix. Since advertising something that doesn't exist is illegal, how does one find out and charge you for it if you also already said it's no longer available when you call to ask for the... Okay. So I cannot charge you for that. I cannot charge you for that. But if I say, hey, listen, I might have other properties available, right? I might have other properties available that are coming up soon. If you like to do a background check, and I know which properties you're looking for, I can start preliminary work. So can I charge you for that at that time? I'm doing some work for you. Maybe. You understand? but not for that particular property. I cannot charge you for that particular property because it doesn't exist. And I mean charge convicted for it. Well, convicted will be the judge, make a decision, right? They have to sue me. How do you put a complaint, you're saying? Okay, so this is where things get tricky. And I'm glad you asked that question. Again, I'm giving you all the rotten things about this profession, what we do. The same thing as doctors, right? Same thing as doctors. You're saying you go there because you have a lot of dandruff, like hair. You have a lot of dandruff, and they say no, the problem is your liver. They give you a pill for the liver. Then they damage your toe, so now they give you something for your toe, right? How do you get to the point where you say, well, doctor, you knew that my issue was dandruff, not the liver, right? And all of a sudden I have all these other problems because of the pills you gave me, right? In real estate is the same thing. Until somebody finds out the pattern, until somebody realizes, wait, this is not normal, right? Most people assume that you are the authority and they expect you to know. And if you're saying, Bruno, it's no longer available, right? You're not saying it was never available. So I'm going to trust you until I realize when I call you again and say, hey, Felix, I want to rent. I noticed that you have another property available, right? And you say, Bruno, it's not available. And if this becomes a pattern, then I'm going to realize, wait a minute, something is wrong, right? How come every time I call Felix is never available, but he's always getting my application or charging me a fee? You see what I'm saying? So how do you find out? Usually it goes by patterns. Like I said, when somebody, I just started with that earlier. When somebody lies, they don't lie once, right? When somebody steals, they don't steal once. Somebody cheats, they don't cheat once. It becomes a pattern. People, oh, it flew. We can do this again, right? Simple. All right, next. You got to keep copies of 1 year of all contracts with customers and all written referral permissions. So you got to keep 1 year of these. The agency must also post these regulations in the offices and provide a copy to consumers when requested. Broker cooperation. What does this mean? Broker cooperation. So, Felix, you have a listing. Could be that rental, right? And I'm an agent, and I'm calling you. And I say, hey, Felix, this is Bruno from New Direction Realty. I've noticed they have this property available for rent. I have a client that would like to see your property. Now, you're with Remax or Center 21 or another agency, right? You're not with our agency. Can you say, well, Bruno, you're with New Direction Realty. I'm not showing the house to you. Can you say that? The answer is no. In New Jersey specifically, like all the states have something to this effect, but in New Jersey specifically, in the law it says you are required to cooperate with brokers from other firms to show listed property. You cannot say, no, not to you, right? You cannot do that. You have to still show the property. And if you put her on the MLS, which is again the cooperation, like when you put on the MLS is to cooperate. As soon as you put on the MLS, as soon as you sign the listing, you must put on the MLS within 48 hours of signing a listing. Why do they have this? Because again, a lot of realtors, what do? A lot of realtors, they get the listing and they hold on to it. And they're advertising the listing to their client base first. And here it goes 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Why are they doing this? So they can get paid full commission on the listing they just obtained. That is illegal. Okay? Now, is it okay for you to get paid in the listing? Full listing, like you can get the 6%. Is it okay? Yes, if you honestly found the client or a customer for it. But within 48 hours must be on the MLS, and then do your best to bring a potential buyer or tenant for this property. You got it? So there's a lot of agents that hold on to it. That's 100% illegal. Some agents don't even put a date. Another thing that's 100% illegal. Until somebody complains. Until the seller says, oh, wait a minute, Bruno, we signed this last week. I still don't see it on Zillow. I still don't see it on Trulio. I don't see it anywhere. I search my property. I don't see it anywhere. Right? And again, I can give an excuse that one day. But if it becomes a pattern, eventually I can get caught. Right? So, again, there's agents and agents. I hope you guys become the good ones, not the bad ones. All right? Unfortunately, I cannot control you guys, but I do hope you become the good ones. All right, let's wait for Nina's question before I address this. All right, when it goes into the MLS, that means you have an exclusive right to sell, or you can do it an open listing and an exclusive agency. So both exclusives, whether exclusive right to sell or exclusive agency, have an option of MLS distribution as well. Open listings do not. Okay? Because exclusive agency and exclusive right to sell means one agency is advertising. On the MLS, only one agency can advertise. Okay? Can other agencies bring potential buyers? Sure. But only one advertises the property. Open listings, no. And that brings to this. So, can a seller say, hey, Bruno, I really like you and I like the way your team works. I don't trust other people. Keep it in-house. Like, don't work with other brokers. Do not advertise this to other brokers. Keep everything in-house. The answer is yes. The seller can say that, and I can keep it in-house, as long as they sign what's called a waiver of broker cooperation form. That waiver says, look, I understand that my property might stay on the market for a longer period of time. I understand that that longer period of time could also bring the value down and be sold for less. But I don't care. I want you to keep it in-house. Don't share with anybody else. Keep it locked tight in the safe. Nobody needs to know about this, right? It's most of the times it's the dumbest thing to do because, again, there's no exposure. If there's no exposure, the highest probable price will not show up, right? But if that's what the seller wants, then that's what we do for the seller. Their wish is our command. You guys understand? But they have to sign this waiver. Very, very important. They have to sign the waiver. Felix, go ahead. Why would anyone want to do that, says Robin. Very good question. I'll give you the example. A few years back, I had a situation where the seller's sister was a realtor. Probably still is, I'm not sure. But was a realtor. And the seller, she did not want her sister to know about this sale. So she came to me and said, Bruno, I know you know that my sister's a realtor, but I don't want her to know. Do you have anybody to buy? Keep it in the house, whatever, but bring me a potential buyer. Now, why wouldn't you want your sister? Why wouldn't you give this to your sister? And the issue here is very simple. She was going to make net $183,000. Now, wait. Net from the sale. That's not how much money she profited because she paid a mortgage, she fixed the house, she did a lot of stuff. So that's not how much she profited. But I don't know how your family is, right? But my family and my friends, they know I won $100 on the lottery, and they knock on my door asking for $5,000. I only won 100, but they're asking for 5,000. So imagine You see what I'm saying? So she did not want her sister to know how much money she was taking away from the deal. So everybody has different reasons, whatever, how crazy they might be. And by the way, I'm joking about the whole family and the scratch off. They actually go for $10,000 when it's $100, not $5. But anyway, everybody's crazy. Everybody has their own views of things. We're all different. We all look at things differently, right? It's just the way it is. Felix, that's what you're going to ask. Great. So why would somebody do it? Whatever their reason is. If you're a good enough realtor, you will be able to break them out of this and say no. You want to sell quick or within this period of time, you want to sell for this amount of money, exposing it on the MLS is the best way to go, right? Attorney General Memorandum. Does anybody remember discrimination, fair housing? You guys remember that? That we have to be equal to everybody? That the only color that we should see is green, right? Closing, money, that's it. All right, very good. So New Jersey actually created a specific form that must be given to every listing. Every listing. So Mr. or Mrs. Seller, if you intend to sell, just know that New Jersey Attorney General created this memorandum that says we have to show the property to anyone that's qualified to buy the property. Simple, right? And if the seller disagrees, if the seller says, everyone except this group of people, if the seller says no, then you must refuse the listing. Okay? Mr. Discriminator, I'm out. Thank you. Simple, right? Unfortunately, most realtors, like I said, because nobody complains, because nobody does anything, most realtors fall into the, hey, it's just a seller, who's going to know, right? Until somebody complains, right? I'm not telling you to live your life on eggshells either, right? But these are common sense. Come on, right? It's common sense. If people intend to discriminate, these are not the right people for you to be working with. Money's money. I get it. But lawsuits, if you guys remember from when we talk about fair housing, right? The lawsuits, the potential jail time, right? Is that the type of life you want to live, right? Oh, but I don't like this kind of people. I don't like that kind of people. Oh, come on. Everybody's equal. When it comes to my pocket, everybody's equal. Simple, right? So I have to treat everybody equal. Because the best I do in this business, the more money I make. Simple. All right, next. Pricing the property. This is one of our responsibilities. And guys, we're almost done with this chapter. We're going to go into break in a little bit. But pricing the property. We talked about this in appraisals. We talked about this in listings. How do we price the property? Well, usually by doing what's called a CMA or comparative market analysis, right? That's what we do. We can also order an actual appraisal that's prepared by a certified appraiser, right? Now look what it says here. It says right here that prior to executing the listing agreement, the agent and the seller must determine the property listing price to include in the agreement, okay? While the seller is the decision maker on the price. So the seller, guys, write this down. The seller determines the listing price. Write this down. The seller determines the listing price. But while the seller is the one that determines the listing price, the seller does not have enough knowledge or experience to determine the appropriate price. What is the appropriate price? The best price or the most probable price that the property will bring. It's called market value, right? So that comes to us. We're the ones, it's the agent's job to recommend the price based on values, based on comps, right? So the seller can say, hey, I want to sell the property for $1 million. Great. Awesome. But you're in an area where the properties are being sold for $250. tough to sell for $1 million in today's market. Maybe later on. Oh, but I really want $1 million. Then Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller, I'm sorry, but I cannot help you, because if I put it for $1 million, it will stay on the market. And look, here's the comparables. Properties above $300,000 have been on the market for 10 months and even expired, some of them. They're not selling. Most of the properties that are selling in the area, they're selling at $250, max $270, right? You're the one that has to present to them what the real value is. Is it possible that one crazy person shows up with cash and say, hey, $1 million, boom, I want it? Is it possible? Yes. But most likely, not going to happen. You understand? So you're the one that's supposed to bring the sellers down to earth and say, not the right market now, right? So what about the buying price? The property that the property actually sells for. That is called the selling price. Okay? So there's a difference between listing price and selling price. I'm going to explain that in a second. But the selling price is determined by supply and demand. Right? So if there's demand, people will put offers. If there's no demand, people will not put offers. So there's too much supply, not enough demand, right? So the prices are balanced based on that. And we talked about that in chapter 15 in real estate market, and we talked about it again in chapter 16 in appraisals, right? So something to remember. There's listing price. Listing price. This is the price that the seller wants to sell for. This is the advertisement price. Listing price is the advertisement price. There's market value. This is the one that we do through the comps, the most probable price that the property will bring. And there's the selling price. This is the price that the property sold for. All right? So very important. The difference between listing price and selling price. It's one is the advertised price. Okay? Advertised price. And the other one is what it's sold for, the actual selling price. Okay? So if I put this on the market, I'm telling you guys right now, I'm selling this phone for $600, right? I'm selling it for $600, right? I'm listing, I'm marketing, listing for $600. If you say, hey, Bruno, $550, it's mine, right? And I agree to it, that's the selling price. That's what it's sold for. That's the difference, all right? Because a lot of people get confused. Selling price is for the seller. No, selling price is what it actually sells for, what we actually closed for. Okay, so three different values when pricing a property. Listing is what the seller wishes, market is what the market demands, and selling is what the buyer actually agreed to. Simple. Megan's Law. You guys heard about Megan's Law? Megan's Law is about, we talked about it also in the previous chapter, but now more in detail. It's about sex offenders. Now, in New Jersey, and like most states, agents may not provide information about registered sex offenders. So we cannot say, oh, next door there's a sex offender. We cannot do that, right? In fact, we cannot even research for them. All we can do is make sure we provide them where the information can be found. So in New Jersey, it's NewJerseyStatePolice.org. Right? Org. And every contract of sale or rental of residential must include a statement that says, just so you know, there are potential sex offenders, there might be potential sex offenders in the area. You are entitled to research this, again, at njsp.org. If somebody asks you, well, Bruno, are there any sex offenders? Well, I cannot research that information, but here's where you can go. Again, NewJerseyStatePolice.org. Right? Because let's think about it. I did address this before, but I'm going to address it again. Let's think about it. having a sex offender in the area or not, how does that affect the property value? Are we going to use it as a negotiation point and say, hey, because there's a sex offender next door, I'm going to bid you $50,000 less. Like, I'll take the sex offender if you drop $50,000 in your house. See what I'm saying? It doesn't affect the physical value. We disclosing this type of information affect the seller's position in the property. It's not the seller's fault that there's a sex offender in the area. Now, what they're saying also is, I understand, you should know what's happening in the community. I get it, right? But we also talked about this before. Psychological conditions and social conditions do not affect the value of the property. Can we research as consumers, not as realtors, but as a consumer, can we research before we move? Sure. My job, guys, as a realtor, is to find the best property to meet your needs. My job is not to figure out social conditions or check every neighborhood to see if there's noise, if there's dogs, if there's parties, right? That's on you. Drive around the area, see if you like it. Research the area, see if you like it. Simple, right? Our job is real estate, not meddling in other people's business. All right? Prohibited activities, because we already went over these in previous chapters. These are common sense, I believe. Making false promises or substantial misrepresentation. These are violations. Representing more than one party in the same transaction without disclosure. Flagrantly. And continually making misrepresentations or false promises and so on. Right? So all this we covered today. We've covered in previous chapters. Right? All this stuff. Yesterday we covered some of these, like the raffles, lottery contests, and so on. All of these. Right? Now, here at the bottom, the licensee may also be disciplined for acting as a broker. Okay? Misuse of escrow funds and use of unlicensed individual to perform acts that require licensure. Now, these three, but mainly these two right here, are the main reasons for the commission's actions against agents. If you guys ever check enforcement, and see the list of violations, most of them are misuse of escrow funds. Some of them are, I'm a salesperson, but I'm acting as a broker or trying to collect directly from the client. And some of them is, hey, I'm paying unlicensed people to find me deals or to do some work for me. I'm sending my secretary to open doors. I'm sending my secretary to open houses for inspections, to recruit, all that stuff, right? So all these three right here are the main reasons for the fault. There's also discrimination, racial steering, pretending to be a lawyer, signing net listings is illegal in New Jersey, and so on. So these you guys know as well. Now, what can happen? We also talked about this in national brokerage and agency as well a little bit. What can happen is the commission can impose fines, but the first thing they'll do is most likely put your license on probation, like a slap in the wrist, don't do this again, right? And if you do it again, then we're going to suspend or revoke your license. So usually this is the order, right? Depending on what it is, they can jump straight to suspension or revocation. And on top of it, impose a penalty of up to $5,000 for first violation or $10,000 for any subsequent violations. They could even deny the further issuance of a real estate license for a repeat, and this is a third-time offender, whether for violating the same or different regulation. Okay? So they can completely deny. Nina, can you use an unlicensed person to do marketing of the properties? If you're talking about Facebook marketing, if you're talking about Instagram marketing, not a problem. If you're talking about your unlicensed assistant going door knocking and say, hey, there's a potential property for sale over there, no. But any online marketing or preparing flyers, not a problem. Who distributes the flyers? We do. Okay? That is it as far as this chapter. Any other questions? Jacqueline, I know you wrote something. I did not see it yet. I guess you had dropped. Was your laptop? Okay. All right, Nina disappeared, so there's questions coming. I don't see a question mark. All right, question. So the social media marketing has to be connected to your account. It should be connected to your business page, not to be connected to your personal account, but you should have a business page, right? And yes, all your advertisement that's for business purposes must be attached to your business. So can they do marketing for you? Somehow it has to talk about you. It's your marketing. Okay. And they prepare, like I have different assistants for different things for marketing as well. All the marketing they do is through my business page, and it comes to my business page, and I reply from my business page, right? So yeah, all social media or any type of marketing has to include your information. If it's not attached to you, then at least must include your information. Very, very important. Okay? Right? Media disappears. You're gonna type for the first time? Like last week, we're like 2 days away from ending, and she's gonna type for the first time? Is that what it is? Sure. The worst part about doing this thing online is like the expectation. Typing, are you not typing? You're gonna ask a question, you're not gonna ask a question. What are we doing here? Right? Like playing double dutch. In, out. All right, YouTube, do you guys have any questions? If not, I'm going to end this session, and then I'll open another one. Ruth is laughing. I'm going to open another one in a second for chapter 28. Nidia, since I don't see your question coming through, okay, there you go. Was that a question, or you just disappeared? No question. She just disappeared. Okay, fine. All right, guys. So we're gonna go into a quick break. It's 10:30, 12:36. We'll be back in 9 minutes. So 12:45, and it's a short chapter. It's just about 30 to 40 minutes. It's a very short chapter. We will be right back. Okay. See you guys in a bit.